This happened a few weeks ago. I've been a forest ranger for over a decade, and I thought I had seen everything the woods had to offer. It was late autumn, and the park was quiet. I was marking a trail, enjoying the crisp air and the rustling leaves. I never thought what was about to happen would change everything. I was walking along the path when I noticed something wedged between two rocks. It was an old notebook, covered in dirt. I picked it up, hoping it belonged to a lost hiker. Flipping through the pages, I found entries written by a ranger who'd gone missing years before. The accounts were bizarre. The writer spoke of strange lights floating between the trees and eerie sounds echoing like voices in the night. It gave me chills. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just a ghost story. That night, things got weird. Around midnight, I heard something outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I heard a voice. It was muffled and distant, almost like someone was calling out. My heart started to race. I stepped outside to find the noise. The night was quiet. I walked a few steps, then stopped. I felt a chill run down my spine. There were flickering lights in the distance. I thought they might be campers, but when I got closer, I found nothing. Just a dark clearing, completely alone. It felt wrong. The next night, my colleagues gathered around the campfire. They shared stories about the missing ranger. One ranger mentioned seeing shadowy figures moving between the trees. Another talked about scratching at their cabin door. I felt a knot form in my stomach. As the days passed, the events escalated. Each night I heard the calls again and saw those flickering lights more often. I started to doubt my own sanity. Was I really hearing things? I didn't want to appear weak in front of my fellow rangers, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. One evening, while on a night patrol, I stumbled upon an empty campsite. The fire pit was cold. There were signs that someone had been there. Used utensils, a blanket left behind. A heavy weight settled in my chest. I turned to leave, but something caught my eye. There was a figure standing outside the glow of my flashlight. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. They turned slowly. I couldn't see their face, but I knew they were staring at me. I should have asked if they were okay, but I just stood there. Suddenly, they vanished into the trees. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I was scared. Then a chilling whisper came from behind me. "Why are you here?" I froze, realizing there was nobody there. My heart raced, and I took a step back. I turned to run, desperate to get to safety. I glanced over my shoulder but saw nothing. Just as I thought I was safe, the whisper came again. "Why are you here?" I knew I had to leave the woods before whatever it was found me. The next day, I decided I had to face what was happening, rather than hide from it. I called a colleague, Jenna, who had been working there almost as long as I had. I told her about the notebook and the lights. At first, she laughed it off, thinking I was just spooked by some late-night campfire tales. But when I recounted my experience in the woods, her expression changed. "Something isn't right, is it?" she asked. I appreciated that she wasn't dismissive. I nodded, feeling relieved. We agreed to head out to the spot where I'd seen the figure. I wanted answers. As we approached the empty campsite, the sun began to dip below the trees, casting long shadows that twisted like fingers through the underbrush. The air felt heavy, as if the forest held its breath. I led the way, my heart hammering in my chest. When we reached the campsite, everything looked just as I'd left it. Jenna inspected the area, noting the scattered utensils in the blanket. "This is strange," she said, glancing around nervously. "The fire pit hasn't been used in days. Where did they go?" Just then, a twig snapped behind us. We both froze. The sound echoed through the clearing, and I turned sharply, shining my flashlight into the darkness. There was nothing there, just trees looming like sentinels. "It's probably just a deer," Jenna said, trying to sound brave, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. I didn't believe it was just an animal. Then I noticed something, a glint of something white catching the light beneath a nearby bush. I walked toward it, my gut twisting with uncertainty. When I kneeled down, I saw it was a scrap of fabric. It was torn, like it belonged to a shirt or a jacket. I looked up to show Jenna, but she had moved deeper into the woods. "Jenna?" I called. No answer. I stood up quickly, panic rising like bile in my throat. "Jenna!" I shouted, but the only response was silence. I took a cautious step forward, my flashlight's beam dancing nervously among the trees. That was when I heard it again, the whisper. But this time it was closer. "Why are you here?" The chilling tone echoed through the woods, sending shivers along my spine. I forced myself to follow Jenna's footsteps, heart racing.
The whispering grew louder, circling around me, taunting. "Why are you here?" I stumbled through the underbrush, fear fueling my movement. I had to find Jenna. It felt like the woods were closing in, a living entity that didn't want us there. Then I tripped over something and fell hard to the ground. I pushed myself up, brushing dirt from my clothes. That's when I saw it. Something moving among the trees, something tall and shadowy. It stopped, its form shifting just out of reach of my flashlight, and I realized I was not alone, not by a long shot. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. The shadow moved again, gliding between the trees as if it was part of the darkness. I gripped my flashlight tighter, the beam flickering as I stepped backwards instinctively. "Jenna!" I called out again, desperation clawing in my throat.
Just then, I heard her voice, faint and barely audible. "Over here." I followed the sound, my heart racing as I pushed past branches scraping against my skin. I stumbled through the underbrush, the flashlight beam cutting through the gloom like a lifeline. "Jenna!" I shouted, pushing my fear to the back of my mind. When I finally found her, she was standing still, staring at something in the distance. I could see the fear etched on her face. "What did you find?" I asked, my voice trembling. "The fire pit," she said, her eyes wide. "Look at the ground." I stepped closer, shining my light down. The earth around the pit was disturbed, like someone had been digging. My stomach twisted. Why would anyone dig here? I wondered aloud. Before she could respond, that whisper cut through the air again. "You shouldn't have come." Both of us froze, the color draining from Jenna's face. "We need to leave," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But the shadows around us shifted, and I felt a sudden chill. "Wait," I said, trying to sound brave. "What if we—" A loud crash echoed behind us. I whipped around, aiming the flashlight, but the light couldn't penetrate the darkness. The trees swayed, and something rustled in the underbrush. Fear gripped me. Jenna grabbed my arm. "We need to go now." I turned to argue, but I caught sight of something moving again. No, several things. Shadows darted between the trees, their movements quick and erratic. I could feel their presence closing in on us. "Run!" I yelled, pulling Jenna away from the fire pit. We sprinted through the forest, weaving between the trees, the sound of branches snapping behind us making my heart race faster. "Where are we even going?" Jenna gasped, trying to keep up. I didn't have a plan. I just knew we needed to be away from that spot. The whispering escalated, rising into a cacophony echoing through the forest. "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't have come." I could feel the panic rising like bile in my throat. What did it want from us? As we broke through the tree line, the campsite came into view. My breath caught. I realized we had run in a circle. No, no, no. I felt a fresh wave of fear. But there was something else there. A figure stood in the clearing, illuminated by the dying light of the sunset. It was the tall shadow I'd seen earlier. My stomach dropped as the figure turned, revealing a face obscured by darkness. I couldn't make out the features, just the hollow eyes that seemed to watch us intently. "Why are you here?" it asked, the voice smooth and chilling. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But something told me we were not just being watched, we were being judged. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest as those hollow eyes bored into me. Jenna was at my side, trembling, her breath quick and shallow. The figure's presence felt suffocating, as if the very air had been sucked from the clearing. "Please, we didn't mean to intrude," I finally blurted out.
My voice trembled with fear, but I fought to keep it steady. "We just wanted to camp." The silhouette tilted its head slightly, and that simple motion seemed to make the shadows dance around it. "You tread on sacred ground," it said, words dripping with a mix of warning and accusation. "What does that mean?" I managed to ask, hoping for some semblance of a logical explanation. "It means you should leave now." I felt a rush of panic. "We will. Just please tell us how." I thought about the path we'd been running on, but the forest felt like a maze that shifted with every heartbeat. Then I noticed the fire pit again. The disturbed earth seemed to pulse with a life of its own. "What happened here?" The figure's gaze shifted toward the pit, and for a moment I saw something flicker in its eyes, an emotion I couldn't quite place. "A trespasser was here before you, one willing to disturb what should remain undisturbed." "What does that mean? Who?" Jenna chimed in, her voice carrying a hint of courage despite the fear wrapping around her. "Questions will only bring ruin," it warned, its voice lowering to a whisper.
Leave this place while you still can. The sound of snapping branches suddenly echoed again behind us. I spun around, the flashlight beam searching the edges of the woods, but all I saw were the trees standing silent and impossibly still. Jenna, we need to go, I urged. I grabbed her hand and started to back away slowly, my eyes glued to the figure. But what about... Just trust me. I pulled her along, urgency flooding my veins. But as we moved away from the fire pit, more shadows appeared, filtering out from between the trees. Their shapes were indistinct, but they were closing in on us. "Run!" I shouted again, and we burst back into the trees. The shadows surged after us, and I could hear their whispers growing louder, more frantic. "You shouldn't have come!" Branches clawed at our skin as we zigzagged through the underbrush. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I wanted to be as far from that pit and the figure as possible. We broke through another thicket and into a clearing. I stopped. My light flickered, and I could barely see through the darkness. In the center was a series of old stone markers arranged in a half circle. "What is this place?" Jenna asked, still puffing for air. "I don't know," I admitted, but something about it felt ancient, almost wrong. As we tried to catch our breath, the whispers returned, echoing through the trees. "You are not alone, and you should not have come." I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, lurking just beyond the reach of the light. That's when I heard it, a loud rustling coming from behind the stones. I gripped the flashlight tighter and took a slow step closer. Something moved beyond the markers, something alive. "Jenna," I whispered, dread creeping back into my chest. Then, everything went dark.
I stumbled forward, my foot catching on something hard and unyielding. I fell, scraping my palms against the cold, damp ground. Panic surged in my chest as darkness enveloped me like a heavy blanket. The only sound was the wild drumming of my heart and the frantic whispers that swirled around me, taunting, warning. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing, and switched on my flashlight. The beam flickered back to life, revealing the stone markers before me. They loomed larger than before, their surfaces etched with strange symbols that I couldn't quite make out. As I focused, shadows danced just beyond the light's edge. I could feel them, shifting, moving with a life of their own. "Jenna?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here," she replied, her voice threaded with fear. I turned the light in her direction and was relieved to see her emerging from the darkness, her face pale and wide-eyed. "What happened?" "I don't know. It just went out. We need to get out of here." I felt the urgency creeping back. The atmosphere was heavy around us, thicker than before. Jenna glanced around, eyes darting. "Those things, they feel so close." "Stay close to me," I spoke with more confidence than I felt, tightening my grip on the flashlight. "Let's move back toward the path. Maybe we can find our way out." We moved cautiously, my heart still racing. Each step felt like it echoed, drawing unwanted attention. The atmosphere felt charged, as if the forest itself were holding its breath, waiting. "Why did we even come here?" Jenna whispered, a tremor in her voice. "I thought it would be fun," I admitted. "A little adventure, but not like this." As we approached the tree line, a low growl rumbled close by. I froze, my blood running cold. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. "It sounds like an animal." Jenna's breath came in quick bursts, her eyes frantically scanning the darkness. "More like a predator." I tightened my grip on the flashlight, directing the beam toward the sound. I could see movement just beyond the trees, a brief flash of fur, darker than the night. That's when I felt it, a creeping sensation of the back of my neck. I turned slowly, the flashlight beam landing on one of the stone markers. Odd markings glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. "What is that?" Jenna stepped closer, her curiosity overtaking her fear. "It looks like it's..." "Jenna, don't touch it," I warned. But it was too late. She reached out, her fingers grazing the surface. The moment she made contact, a sudden roar pierced the air, sending us both stumbling backward. The ground trembled beneath us as the whispering voices erupted into a cacophony. "Leave this place." The markers vibrated as if they were alive, the symbols glowing brighter. I felt energy swirling around us, an intense pull that I couldn't explain. We turned to run, but it was too late. Shadows erupted from the trees, the figures closing in. "Run," I shouted again, pushing Jenna ahead of me. But the darkness was alive, wrapping around us, pulling us back toward the markers, toward whatever ancient force had awoken. And in that moment, I realized the forest had no intention of letting us go. Jenna stumbled as we ran, her foot catching on an unseen root. I couldn't help but look back. The shadows were closer, almost brushing against my back. My breath came in sharp gasps as I urged her on. "Keep moving! We have to keep moving!" The growl from earlier morphed into a series of guttural sounds, growing louder and angrier, echoing through the trees. Frantic, I swung the flashlight back toward the path. I could see the outline of the trail just ahead, a faint glimmer of hope, but the throaty snarl made it clear we were being hunted. "Right! This way!" I shouted, darting toward the opening. Jenna followed, but I could feel the darkness closing in behind us, relentless and hungry. Just as I reached the edge of the trees, something heavy slammed into me from the side. I stumbled and fell to the ground, my flashlight flickering as it clattered away from my grasp. Jenna screamed as she turned back for me. "Get up! Come on!" She reached out, her hand trembling. I scrambled for my flashlight, sweat stinging my eyes. I grabbed it and flicked it back on. The beam landed on Jenna just as she was pulled backward by an unseen force, her terrified face reflecting my own panic. "Jenna!" I yelled, lunging for her. The shadows seemed to laugh as they obscured her figure. I felt a surge of desperation. In that moment, I remembered the markers. "The symbols!" I shouted, the words spilling out. "They were glowing. Maybe they can help." "Help!" Jenna's eyes were wide, but I could see the fear give way to resolve as she fought against whatever gripped her. I quickly returned my gaze to the symbols, searching for something, anything that could help us. I noticed one of the markers was pulsing more than the others, brighter, almost like a beacon calling out to us. "We need to reach it," I shouted, even as doubt crept in. With renewed determination, I took Jenna's hand and pulled her toward the glowing marker. The shadows howled, furious at our escape. I could almost make out their forms now, wraith-like figures, faces obscured but filled with rage. The closer we got, the brighter the marker glowed. The energy surged around us, sending a shiver down my spine. "We can do this," I urged, "just a little closer." We stumbled forward, still holding hands, our heartbeats sinking in frantic tandem. And then, as we reached the threshold of the marker, a blinding light erupted from the stone. It consumed us both. I felt rocks and soil shift beneath my feet, the dark world around us receding. The whispers changed to screams. The shadowy figures shrank back, as if pushed by an invisible force. "What is happening?" Jenna cried, her voice rising in sharp pitch. "I don't know," I shouted back, shielding my eyes from the brightness. But suddenly, everything went dark again. The beam of my flashlight flickered out, leaving us in pitch silence. Are we safe?" Jenna's voice trembled, her breath warm against my ear. "I don't think so." I felt a cold presence begin to encircle us, pressing in with a weight that made it hard to breathe. Then came a soft, yet commanding voice. "You should not have come here." That's when I felt it. A cold hand gripping my shoulder from behind. I jerked away, heart racing. I spun around, ready to confront whatever had touched me. But nothing was there, just darkness reeling around us. My mind screamed, was it a trick of the light? A shadow passing? "Did you feel that?" I whispered, my voice barely breaking through the thick silence. Jenna nodded, eyes wide with fear. "What was it?" "I don't know." Panic clawed at me. I was desperate to believe we weren't alone, that we had found safety, but this felt different. "Maybe we still need to get to the symbols. They might protect us." "Okay." Jenna's voice shook slightly as she grabbed my hand. "But where are they? I can't see anything." There was no light, no guiding beacon. "The symbols," I muttered, trying to remember their exact locations in the chaos. "They have to be nearby." With a deep breath, I took a tentative step forward, but the ground felt uneven. Jenna clung to me as we moved slowly, feeling our way through the suffocating darkness. I strained to hear something, anything. But the air was thick, almost oppressive. And then, just as I was questioning whether we were even still in the same place, a dull glow began to emerge in the distance. I squinted, energy surging back into my steps. "Look, over there!" We rushed forward, the pulse of the light promising salvation. But when we reached it, the glow flickered, waning as if testing our resolve. I reached out, desperate to touch the warm glow. Jenna hesitated, her breath hitching like she sensed something off. "Are you sure it's safe?" "Safe?" I repeated,
voice trembling with unease. Do we really have a choice? As I placed my palm against the symbol, a wave of warmth flooded through me, but it was followed by a sharp jolt of fear. Visions flashed in my mind, images of ancient forests, creatures lurking behind trees, and faces twisted with rage. I stumbled back, disoriented. What was that? Jenna's face paled. I saw things. Ghosts? No, I shook my head, trying to make sense of it. They weren't just ghosts. They were angry. Before I could dwell on it, the darkness around us shifted. There was movement, quick, darting shadows at the edge of my vision. Panic rose like bile. We weren't alone, not at all. Jenna, we have to go, I shouted, pulling her back away from the marker. The glimmer faded into darkness, just as another growl echoed, a low, rumbling sound that made my skin crawl. I felt the icy hand of dread crawl over me as I grabbed Jenna and turned to flee. We could not let them catch us. Where do we go?
Jenna's voice quivered as we broke into a sprint. "Back to the trees!" I shouted, even though part of me screamed that the woods were where the danger awaited, but we had to find some way to escape. We sprinted, the howls behind us rising to a crescendo, and then, just as we reached the trees, something snagged at my ankle, and I went tumbling to the ground. As I scrambled to regain my footing, I caught a glimpse of a figure emerging from the shadows, eyes glowing unnaturally bright. I froze. That didn't look like any ghost or wraith I'd encountered before. "Run!" I yelled as the figure stepped closer, and Jenna's scream pierced the air, tearing through the silence as we barely escaped. "Wait!" I called, but fear swallowed my command, because I realized one thing too late. We were not the ones running anymore. Not from this place. The ground felt rough against my palms as I pushed myself back on my feet. Panic surged through me, fueling an instinct to flee deeper into the trees. Jenna was already several steps ahead, her silhouette skimming through the shadows. I called after her, my voice harsher than I intended. "Jenna, wait!" But she kept running. The howls chased us, cutting through the air, sharp and hungry. I barely kept up, fear igniting every nerve in my body. Something wicked was in those woods, something that fed off our terror. As branches clawed at my skin and the underbrush tangled at my feet, I gasped for breath. "We need to get somewhere safe," I shouted, hardly able to hear my own voice over the chaos. "Look!" Jenna stopped suddenly, pointing to a clearing ahead. "There!" The faint light of the moon slashed through the trees, illuminating a circular patch of ground. In the center stood a massive rock, covered in the same glowing symbols I'd seen before. My heart plummeted. "Do you think it'll work?" Jenna wasn't waiting for an answer. She sprinted toward the rock, and I followed without thinking. As we reached it, the glow pulsated gently, like it sensed our fear. I pressed my hand against the surface, half expecting it to provide comfort or clarity. Instead, another jolt of fear and rage flashed through me, and this time it felt personal. Faces twisted in anguish surged into my mind, each one more terrifying than the last. I staggered back, gasping, "What is this place? What are we doing?" "I don't know," Jenna cried, stepping closer to me. "But we can't stay out here. We need to figure out how to use it." An echoing growl rumbled through the clearing, closer, more menacing than before. It was like a physical weight, pressing on my chest. I struggled to focus. What if the symbols are meant for something else? What if they're a trap? Jenna's eyes darted around. "We don't have time to think. We have to find a way to use them against whatever is hunting us." Just then, from behind the rock, a figure emerged. It was human-shaped, but warped, like a nightmare-made flesh. The glowing eyes zeroed in on us, a predatory stare that split through the darkness. I felt my breath hitch. "Jenna," I whispered, backing away slowly. "What do we do?" But Jenna was already moving towards the creature. "We can't let it take us. This was our only chance." She reached for the glowing symbols, trembling but determined, and as her fingers brushed one, the air crackled around us. The figure paused, confusion washing over its features. For a moment, it felt like we had a chance. Then the growl turned into a roar. The creature lunged forward, and I saw the truth through the haze of fear. We weren't meant to control the symbols. We were the prey in its game. Before I could react, I grabbed Jenna's arm and yanked her away from the rock. "Run!" I shouted, but the words barely left my mouth when the world around us went black. In an instant, the glowing symbols flickered and extinguished, plunging us into total darkness once more. "Jenna!" I called, panic rising anew. The silence pressed down, stifling, enveloping us. "Where are you?" Her voice trembled, and I could hear the desperation in it. I reached out into the void, touching nothing but air. Then everything went cold. A breath, so close it sent chills down my spine, whispered in my ear. "Not escaping this time." My heart dropped as the realization hit. They were closing in, and I had no idea how to fight back. I stood frozen, a chill running down my spine. Jenna's voice wavered in the dark, but I couldn't move. The presence looming over us was suffocating, like a heavy blanket that threatened to smother my thoughts. "We need to find each other," I whispered back, wishing my voice didn't tremble. Just then, out of the oppressive silence, a soft rustling snapped my attention. It sounded like leaves crunching underfoot, deliberate and slow. I strained to listen, scanning the shadowy landscape. Something was out there, creeping closer, but I couldn't tell what. "Is it you?" I asked, extending my arm into the bleakness. I was grasping at nothing, desperately hoping that Jenna would suddenly materialize in front of me. "No," came her shaky reply, barely above a whisper. "It's not me." That confirmed it. Something was approaching us. My heart raced again, each beat echoing in my ears. Panic surged. I needed to act. I stepped back, not wanting to turn my back on whatever hunted us, but I stumbled over the rocky ground. My foot slipped, and I fell hard, my shoulder hitting the cold earth. "Watch out!" I yelled, but before I could process where the threat was, a sound shattered the air, a low, guttural growl. The world around us held its breath. "We have to get back to the rock," I cried, trying to pull myself up. I could barely see Jenna, just a shape, but I knew she'd be scared too. "Are you crazy?" she hissed. "That thing is by the rock." "What else can we do?" I shot back, desperation making me reckless. "We can't stay here."
I seized her hand, squeezing it tight as I led us toward the last place I remembered the rock standing. We moved carefully, closer together, aware that every movement could attract attention. When we reached the clearing, the looming figure stood there, half illuminated by what little moonlight broke through the treetops. It was writhing, as if the very shadows were alive, twisting around it, feeding its form. "Let go," Jenna shouted, pulling me back. "There has to be another way." Fear tangled with adrenaline. "What if it's tied to the symbols?" I urged. "It might not follow us if we can activate them." Reluctantly, Jenna nodded, though her eyes widened in horror when the creature shifted. Its gaze zeroed in on us, unblinking and hungry. "It can tell what we're trying to do," she whispered. With no time to waste, I reached for the rock. My fingers brushed against the surface, half hoping for the same response as before. Nothing happened, but the symbols glared back at me, taunting. The creature lunged, and instinct kicked in. I pushed Jenna aside, not thinking, and felt the rush of wind as it barely missed me. I stumbled but forced myself to stay standing. "We have to try again." I slammed my palm onto the rock, feeling the hum of energy surge. This time, the symbols began to glow fiercely. "Come on," I yelled, and Jenna rushed to help, her hands joining mine, desperation fueling us. But the moment felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. The growl escalated into a roar that echoed through the woods, shaking the very ground beneath us. Then everything went bright. Light erupted from the rock, illuminating the clearing and everything within it, casting long shadows that danced with life. That's when I saw it. A figure in the light, different this time, a flash of something silver. A clue? A warning? I couldn't tell. But it only fueled my fear. "What now?" I gasped. Before I could think, the creature was charging again, driven by fury, and the figure I'd glimpsed in the light vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving us with no answers, but plenty of questions. The light from the rock flared, drowning the clearing in an otherworldly brightness. For a brief moment, I was overwhelmed by a cacophony of visions. Shapes twisted and turned through the haze, shadows retreating even as they charged forward. I held my breath, waiting for the inevitable clash, to feel the creature's wrath. Instead, silence swallowed the chaos for an instant, as the shadows seemed to sizzle against the light. The growls and whispers fell away, replaced by an almost velvety quiet that wrapped around us. "Is it working?" Jenna's voice quivered beside me, but I couldn't answer. I was too caught in the spectacle, the glow illuminating more than just the physical. It illuminated the truth buried deep within the forest.
Each symbol pulsed with meaning, their connection to the very land we stood upon. Then, like a predator cornered, the shadow figure hesitated.
It recoiled, snarling but visibly shaken. I felt a rush of hope. Maybe our instinct was right. Maybe the symbols could repel whatever dark force had claimed this place as its own. Just a little longer, I urged, tightening my grip on Jenna's hand. We needed to believe in the light, in whatever ancient power dwelled in the stone. But the figure wasn't done. Its features morphed with rage, tendrils of darkness stretching toward us, almost clawing at the light. "You shouldn't have come here," it growled, the words dripping with malice. The light flickered, threatening to fade, and I realized I needed to dig deeper. "Focus! We can't let it win!" I shouted, summoning the last reserves of my strength. The symbols glowed hot beneath our palms, a pulse we had to synchronize with. Jenna's eyes widened as their brightness surged, and suddenly the symbols began to resonate alongside our heartbeat. I felt a teleportation of energy, the fear, despair, and anger swirling in a cyclone around us, ripping through the very fabric of the night. "Let go of the anger," Jenna shouted. "It won't work if we're scared." But fear was embedded in my bones. I couldn't shake it off, not while sensing the entity's slow advance. Just hold on," I gasped, fighting against the chaos. The light pulsed, growing ever more vibrant, pulling energy from the shadows like a magnet. In that moment, everything changed. The air thickened, and the light burst forth in a blinding wave. The shadows shrieked, the creature's form contorting as it was pushed back, perhaps even forgotten in the sudden torrent of power emanating from the rock. I squeezed Jenna's hand tighter, and as we stood resolute, the energy enveloped us. The light twisted and curled, branches and leaves, objects long buried in the forest, intertwining and spinning around us in an explosion of illumination. I shut my eyes against the brilliance. I could feel our surroundings shift dramatically, a whirling vortex pulling me in every direction, the sensation of slipping between layers of reality, none tangible and yet all too real. As quickly as it began, everything stopped. I stumbled, blinking against an abrupt absence of light. I looked around to find myself back in the clearing, panting heavily. My breath hung like frost in the air, and I felt dizzy. "Jenna," I called, panic creeping in again. "I'm here," came her voice. She sounded faint. What just happened? But I didn't have answers. The symbols were dark now, the rock cold. No trace of the creature remained, no flickering shadows or echoes of malice, just an eerie stillness. What do we do? Jenna looked back into the woods, where all those whispers had merged into the silence. Did we win? Maybe, I ventured, the uncertainty knotting in my stomach. The symbol I had touched still left a phantom tingle in my palm, but the forest seemed indifferent now. Had we altered something, or simply escaped?
But as I tried to collect my thoughts, a haunting realization washed over me. I turned toward the depths of the woods that loomed heavily behind us. We did something, but I can't shake the feeling it isn't over. Jenna nodded, her brow furrowing. "You think we're still being watched?" The air was still, but I felt that querying consciousness lurking just beyond reach. "I don't know, but I don't want to find out." I glanced around at the dark outline of the forest, deciding then and there that whatever knowledge lay contained within that sacred ground wasn't meant for us. I didn't want another glimpse into the darkness. "We should leave," I said firmly, turning to trace our steps back toward the path for the second time that night. As we started walking, the forest loomed behind us like a sentinel, and I couldn't shake the feeling that while we had escaped, the woods held deeper secrets yet to be unearthed. I had a lingering suspicion that darkness had merely retreated, unnoticed, waiting for the opportune moment to re-emerge. As we stepped back onto the trail, I took one last glance at the shimmering markers, a shiver racing down my spine. Whatever shadows haunted that place, they weren't just echoes of the past, they were reminders of an enigma that would never fully reveal itself. And though we walked away, I knew it wouldn't be the last time I thought about that forest, the whispers that lingered in the night, or the shadows that moved ever closer with every stolen glance backward.